Today we're going to talk about one of the most exciting nights in cryptocurrency history. And for any of you that watch this in the future, again, I'm not sure about the shelf life of these videos. This was the first time, because there might be more, that Bitcoin Cash really caused fear in the minds of investors that it might replace Bitcoin. This was the first time that a hard-forked cryptocurrency was really illustrating the ability to possibly overtake Bitcoin in terms of market cap. If we look at the price action here, you can see that Bitcoin was going downward and Bitcoin Cash was spiking. And at its peak, Bitcoin Cash was $2,800 and Bitcoin went all the way down to $5,400. Now you want to be mindful of the fact that just literally 3 to 4 months ago, Bitcoin was trading at this $2,800 level. So this is nothing short of remarkable. And as Bitcoin Cash was going parabolic and as Bitcoin was going down, there was some serious fear in the hearts of investors that Bitcoin was going to get displaced and that Bitcoin Cash was going to become the new Bitcoin. And the actions and behavior and the emotions that I saw last night illustrated to me one of the greatest threats to Bitcoin that I don't really see discussed all that often. And that is the herd mentality of investors in this particular market and how emotionally influenced they are by price action. I mean, really, people piled into Bitcoin Cash when it was at absurd levels. I mean, truly absurd levels relative to the number of transactions that are processed on that particular network. Don't get me wrong, of course the transaction fees are lower, and Bitcoin Cash is, and I'm going to say this for a fact, Bitcoin Cash is a better transaction medium than Bitcoin. A lot of people were saying how I was far too biased towards Bitcoin. I have no problem admitting that Bitcoin Cash is in fact easier, well maybe not easier, but better to use than Bitcoin in terms of transactions. Of course, that's partially because of the fact that Bitcoin is so much larger in terms of the transaction volume, but there are other factors as well, given that, of course, Bitcoin has much smaller block sizes, which means it can only process so many transactions in a particular block. And because the miners are not actually using SegWit, or at least many of them aren't, the scaling benefits of SegWit really haven't hit the network all that well yet. So as a result of that, we still have close to 1 megabyte blocks, and it's really not scaling as much as people would hope, and the transaction fees are going up. So without a doubt, Bitcoin Cash is the better transaction medium than Bitcoin is. However, in order for Bitcoin to lose its throne as the king, I mentioned this in my last video, and people for whatever reason seem to think that the Bitcoin brand isn't that important, yet that's exactly what Bitcoin Cash is trying to build off of and take. The reason why Bitcoin Cash even has a chance is because it could theoretically take the name Bitcoin. That's why, when we think about Ethereum and the flippening, Ethereum has more transactions than Bitcoin does, has more use cases than Bitcoin does, and probably has a larger overall market that it can target, and yet it is a third of a single Bitcoin. So basically, despite all of that, Bitcoin really has remained the king, and that is because of its brand. It's beyond me that people think that Bitcoin Cash does not need the Bitcoin name. It does need the name. That's what this is all about. In order for Bitcoin to be taken over, you do in fact need the Bitcoin name, which is kind of funny. Only Bitcoin can beat Bitcoin. But anyway, the point of all of this is to say that when we saw this last night, people were just piling in money because they didn't want to miss out. And I saw some very odd behavior and suggestions from people that I believe to be very logical and intelligent that didn't make a ton of sense. And probably the biggest suggestion that I've seen that doesn't make any sense, so if you are using this strategy, I'd like you to think twice about it, is people that bought Bitcoin Cash to hedge against the cashioning. That does not make any sense. And here's why. You certainly are in your right to hedge against the Bitcoin cashioning event, because certainly this was fairly scary, right? I mean, you have to admit that this was very interesting, seeing Bitcoin go down to 5,400 and Bitcoin Cash go up to 2,800. It certainly was starting to look like this was more than just a fluke. This was a strong possibility all of a sudden to many people. Hedging by purchasing Bitcoin Cash made no sense last night. I want you to look at this side of the chart on Bitcoin Cash, and now I want you to look at this side of the chart on Bitcoin. They are completely the inverse of each other. And in fact, they peaked and valleyed at the exact same moment. Okay? At 1:30. Roughly in that area. Okay? So, what people were doing when they tried to hedge by buying Bitcoin Cash, what they were doing was essentially reducing their net long position on Bitcoin. What do I mean by this? I mean, when you bought Bitcoin Cash last night to hedge against the cashioning, you were effectively doing the same thing as just selling Bitcoin. When you employ that strategy, you are essentially going long and short on the same asset, at least when they're this correlated. Of course, the correlation between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash will reduce as the likelihood that it's a takeover goes down. In other words, if you invested in Bitcoin Cash when it was trading in these lower levels here and people weren't talking about it, they were focused on SegWit2x. If you bought during these levels, it wasn't correlated with Bitcoin at all because there was no thought within the community that it was going to replace Bitcoin. Therefore, the relationship between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash was not perfectly inverse. In fact, I would argue that it had almost no relationship or correlation at all. But last night, they were perfectly inverse of each other, so hedging by purchasing the other one really did nothing for you other than you just reduced your net long position in Bitcoin. If you wanted to hedge against the cashioning, there's only one way to do that. Either A, reduce your position in Bitcoin, or 2, you can purchase altcoins, move into a different position within the market. But when you buy Bitcoin Cash, you really serve no purpose other than to tie more capital in your portfolio into another cryptocurrency that has the same purpose as basically selling Bitcoin. But if you sell Bitcoin, you have that liquidity in terms of cash so that you can buy altcoins or whatever else. So for those of you that tried to hedge last night by purchasing Bitcoin Cash, if this happens again or even now, don't hedge by buying Bitcoin Cash. And the same goes the opposite way. If you're trying to hedge in the event that Bitcoin Cash is not able to overtake Bitcoin, don't hedge by buying Bitcoin. That doesn't do anything for you when they're so perfectly inverse of each other at the moment. Rather, either reduce your position in Bitcoin Cash or just invest in altcoins. That's your alternatives. But don't go and purchase the other cryptocurrency. It makes zero sense. So I just wanted to talk about that because, in my opinion, it's one of those things that emotionally it will make sense, right? I'm betting on both sides of the story here, so how can I lose? Well, maybe you're not going to lose, but it's effectively the same way as reducing your net long position. Now, don't get me wrong, Bitcoin Cash is moving bigger in terms of percentages than Bitcoin. So if you hedged by buying Bitcoin Cash, you might have gotten more return than if you had sold Bitcoin. Okay? But if you're doing it for the purposes of hedging, then it makes no difference. If you're doing it for the purposes of you actually believe Bitcoin Cash is going to take over and is going to have a higher return than Bitcoin, then just buy Bitcoin Cash instead of buying Bitcoin. You know, again, it's this mentality that a lot of people have that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And a ton of people jumped on board with this last night. I mean, it's amazing to me just how many people jumped in to purchase Bitcoin Cash. We had an absurd amount of volume, over $10 billion in a cryptocurrency that at its peak had a valuation of $40 billion or so. So overall, I just wanted to talk about this because this market was driven by emotion, by FOMO, by FUD. And then there's that paste spin that's going around about the conspiracy theory that essentially this was all planned from the beginning. And for those of you that are really fearful as a result of that paste spin, it's awfully convenient that it pops up now and really gets popular. And I'm not saying it wasn't written back then, it was. However, there have been conspiracy theories about cryptocurrencies and about closed door agreements and all of this since the dawn of cryptocurrencies. And guess what? It's really happened since the dawn of time in politics, in the government, in just about anything you can imagine. We're still having conspiracy theories about 9/11, right? I mean, seriously, everybody realize that this is the nature of these types of passionate markets. There's going to be opinion pieces out there about what's happening behind closed doors. And there's no way for us to know the truth other than what gets revealed to us publicly. So if you're looking at that pay spin and you're afraid, or you feel like the whole market's being manipulated or this or that, yeah, it probably is being fully manipulated, but don't think about that as if it is the absolute golden truth, because it really, I mean, a lot of it is just fear mongering. And that's the reality of this market. That's the greatest threat to not only Bitcoin, but I think cryptocurrencies as a whole, is how much fear there is. And it's on both sides of the story. We have fear of missing out, and we have FUD, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This, in my opinion, has led to people making decisions that just really don't make sense in the end. And actually has led to me being a little concerned that maybe we are really in a bubble, because people are behaving exactly as people do in a bubble. They invest in something that they don't believe in just because they believe it's going to go up further and further and further. And there's a name for that. It's the greater fool investing theory, where you feel that you can sell to somebody else who will pay even a higher price, even though you don't think that it's worth that much in the first place. So I wanted to talk about that because, man, last night was a night of passion. I mean, seriously, 50 Shades of Grey has nothing on what we just saw last night with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts. As usual, if you would like to support me, check out the description for some Amazon affiliate links. I receive a small amount of compensation for your next order that you make within 24 hours after clicking one of those links, even if it's not the item that I have listed. So check those out. Otherwise, leave a like, comment, and subscription, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you for watching.